When Pascua's daughter collapsed at her wedding and passed away just hours later, the tragedy left everyone heartbroken. However, it was what unfolded after her funeral that truly captured the public's imagination. A strange and shocking event occurred, leaving people stunned. Pasquale Espera, a self-made man, had opened his dress shop at the age of 24. Newly married and deeply devoted to his daughter, Roselia, she was his world. He harbored grand dreams for her future, hoping she would find a loving husband and lead a life as fulfilling as his own. Fast forward to him being in his 50s, it was the booming 1930s, and his little girl wasn't so little anymore. Roselia was now a grown woman with her own aspirations. She dreamed of being a nurse to help people get better, but while she was in nursing academy, she met the man of her dreams. When she took her boyfriend home to meet her father, he was over the moon to meet a man of such good caliber. That night, the man asked for her hand in marriage, to which Roselia's parents gladly obliged. They were so happy to know their little girl was going to be taken care of and in love for the rest of her life. They wasted no time starting to plan the wedding. They intended it to be the social event of the town. People were so excited to see their little Roselia fulfill her fairy tale, her father especially. He made it his mission to help her have the perfect dress. Being a dressmaker and owning a shop was quite advantageous in this regard. He searched high and low for the most fashionable patterns, and they sat and spoke about the design for hours at night. It was a special bonding period. When the day came, everyone was so excited to see the stunning bride and groom. Roselia looked wonderful in her dress. Everyone was swooning. Her parents especially were beaming with pride at their beautiful daughter. After the ceremony, everyone retired to the reception to have a party. But while they were all dancing, the bride and groom stepped out onto the lawn to take some photos. While Roselia was sitting on the floor, she felt a sharp pain in her hand. When she looked to see what the cause was, however, she couldn't see anything. So they carried on with their wedding, returning to the wedding party and their celebrations. But just an hour later, she started to feel extremely dizzy and sick. Roselia just thought that maybe the lack of nerves and the fact that she hadn't eaten anything would be the cause, but she just felt worse and worse until suddenly she collapsed onto the dance floor unconscious. Her parents rushed to her side and saw how awful she looked. They were terrified at what it might be. Without a second thought, they rushed her to the hospital. The doctors rushed her into emergency care, but by that time it was too late. Roselia had passed away. Naturally, Pasquale and his wife thought that the doctors were playing a cruel prank on them when they announced her death. This couldn't be. A few hours earlier, they had just seen their beautiful daughter commit her life to her husband, and now she was no longer. It couldn't possibly be. But the doctors were calm and patient. Once the parents had stopped their protest, they once again explained that their daughter had, in fact, passed away. They had found a spider bite on her hand and were convinced that she had been bitten by a black widow spider. This fatal bite had sealed her fate in a way her parents couldn't grasp. Roselia's mother, especially Anna, was beside herself with grief. Once the shock wore off, she collapsed on the floor of the emergency care unit and wailed her heart out. No matter the care or help offered, she simply refused. The doctors eventually had to administer a tranquilizer to the poor woman to help her calm down. Pasquale was also grief-stricken, but he showed this in a different way. He just went deathly quiet. He refused to acknowledge that his little girl was dead. When people from the community inquired about her, many of them were at the wedding and saw her collapse. They were just as equally shocked to find out that she had died. It sent everyone reeling. Even in his shaken state, Pasquale needed to organize a funeral for his little girl. His wife was in no state to do it, so he had to. They needed to have the funeral as soon as possible due to their religious beliefs. It was a really hard thing to organize considering they had just been organizing her wedding. It all felt so surreal. Just 7 days later, they managed to pull together a funeral for the young woman. People from all over the region came to pay their respects to the beautiful young woman. The tragedy that had befallen her was felt by many, even if they didn't know her. The funeral was beautiful, just like her and her wedding. Anna couldn't keep herself together. She wailed and cried throughout the funeral, often leaning on her husband for support. The poor man was also struggling immensely, but he did so in silence. He felt he needed to be strong for his wife and his late daughter. People who attended the funeral were quite surprised by something. While the whole funeral was beautiful and very traditional, there was one thing quite out of the norm. The casket was closed. This began a conversation among all the attendees, who were quite confused by this. Rosalia was a beautiful young woman who often stood out amongst her colleagues. She had passed away from a bite, so there was no physical reason why she would be hidden. So why had her parents chosen to have a closed casket? When some of her friends asked Pascua why it was a closed casket funeral, they were met with a lot of aggression from the old man. Pascua was angry with anyone who asked. It was almost as though he was mad at them for even asking the question. However, there did seem to be a look of slight guilt on his face. He claimed that he and his wife wanted their daughter to rest in peace and privacy. He said he didn't want people looking at her in her death. People reluctantly accepted his explanation, but felt that there was something strange about it all. They were convinced that there was another explanation that he wasn't divulging to them. The funeral went well and was well attended, so Rosalia got her final send-off in a good fashion. But then, just a few days later, something really strange happened. Just over a week after they had said their final goodbyes to their daughter, Pasquale reopened his shop for business. He had taken a few days off to show respect to his daughter's death. When he reopened the shop, he left people gasping as they walked past the display window. Anna made her way down to her husband's shop to give him his lunch when she saw a mass of people gathered outside the display window. She was quite confused as to why this was happening. All she could think of was that her husband had received a new dress that everyone was smitten with. She wasn't prepared for what she saw. As she got closer to the window, she stopped to have a look. What she saw simply took her breath away. She finally understood why everyone was glued to the display window. In the window stood the most lifelike-looking mannequin she had ever seen in her entire life. If that wasn't enough to shock her completely, when she looked at the mannequin, all she could see was her daughter. The lifelike mannequin was a double of her late daughter. In absolute shock, she dropped her husband's lunch on the floor. This caused the women to turn around and look at her. When they saw her looking, they turned their attention to her. They asked her if she knew how the mannequin could look so much like her daughter. Anna was without words. People began noticing the uncanny resemblance between the lifelike mannequin and the woman whose funeral had a closed casket. Whispers spread that the woman's father had somehow preserved her body, turning her into a statue. When local authorities questioned Pasquale, he vehemently denied such a bizarre accusation, outraged that people could even conceive of such an idea. Despite his denials, the rumors persisted. 80 years later, people still talk about La Pascualita, who remains in the window of the dress shop in Chihuahua, Mexico. Visitors from around the world come to see the mysterious figure. It's an incredible tale. Can you believe that a man might turn his daughter into a living mannequin? What do you think was the reason behind the closed casket? I'm really keen to know your thoughts, so please don't hesitate to share your insights in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and found it engaging, I invite you to subscribe to our channel for more similar content. Feel free to share this video. Take good care of yourselves, and I'm excited to connect with you in our future videos.